It's important in this community that we're aware of child sexual exploitation because it's everybody's responsibility. It doesn't matter whether you're a hotel owner, whether you're a parent, whether you work for the council, whether you're a police officer. We all need to look after our children because they're the people of our future.
So what is CSE? CSE is child sexual exploitation. It occurs when there's a victim under the age of 18 years old and happens when there's a perpetrator or an offender who seeks to take advantage of that young person, coercing them, deceiving them, encouraging them to engage in sexual activity, which a young person may think they're consenting to, but actually there's a power imbalance that's at play. In terms of signs that a young person or child is being sexually exploited, there's a number of things that you can look out for. One of the main indicators is in relation to a change of behaviour. So it could be a change in who they're hanging around with, how they're spending their time. They might have sporting interests and hobbies that they're no longer engaging with. Another indicator might be around missing, so in terms of the whereabouts being unknown, maybe hanging around with new friends, new locations, feeling maybe more distant from their family. You also might notice with a young person that they might look different. So physically, they might be having more injuries. They might look withdrawn. There may be signs that they're using drug and alcohol, so returning home under the influence. Maybe returning home with new gifts or new items that are unaccounted for. It could be a new mobile phone, new jacket, new trainers. Something that the young person can't explain how they could afford that. So often we experience young people who return home with additional phones. It could be a new iPhone. As we know, they're not cheap and they're not easy to get hold of. So it could be asking a few questions. Who's paying that bill? Who paid for the handset? We often get young people who return home with maybe kind of tracksuit bottoms, designer clothes that are expensive but also unaccounted for. Young people might become increasingly secretive when they're being exploited, so they might return home maybe with a bag, it looks like it's got some items in it. Again, maybe go straight to their bedroom to hide their items. So in terms of online exploitation, the grooming process is a key process used by perpetrators to trap victims. So what they might do is reach out to young people on different social media platforms using language that the young person might use, maybe posting fake pictures, building up a fake profile of themselves, all designed to entice that young person. Once they initiate the conversation with that young person, it might be around sending them stuff, getting more details about them and really gathering the vulnerabilities of that young person. So if, for example, if a young person has experienced abuse, we've had perpetrators online reaching out to victims, asking them to tell them about the abuse, being kind of the friendly ear for them to talk to and disclose information to. And that is really where the entrapment process starts in terms of exploitation. They might encourage the young person to share indecent images, maybe arrange to meet them, live stream videos. It kind of all depends on the power imbalance and what that perpetrator is hoping to succeed. Another thing to look out for might be if a young person is presenting as intoxicated or under the influence of something. Alcohol and drugs can often be used to manipulate young people, to kind of make them less aware of their surroundings and what's going on and less able to react. So if, for example, you're in a pub or a hotel and you notice that a young person doesn't seem to be aware of their surroundings or what's going on, it's really important to start asking questions and looking a bit deeper into what's happening. That could be around establishing the relationship of who the young person's with, checking IDs, speaking to the young person, seeing if they know the name of the people that they're with, if they know where they've been that night and what's going on. A lot of the victims of exploitation that we work with often don't recognise they've been exploited. They might see themselves as being able to consent to what is happening without realising the power imbalance or that they've been manipulated or deceived into the situation. Young people often feel that they have control of the situation, but it's only afterwards when we start unpicking what has happened and looking at the concerns that we know that they haven't had control and that there has been a power imbalance. In England, the law is that a young person under the age of 16 cannot consent to sexual activity. However, 16 and 17-year-olds can still be exploited. The issues that come into play here are where there's a power imbalance and other things may have happened. For example, a 16 or a 17-year-old may have a learning difficulty that affects their ability to give informed consent and to understand what they're consenting to. Substances can be used to hinder a young person's view or perception of what's happening. One approach that perpetrators may use is to encourage a young person to use alcohol and substances. It might start off with drinking, using cannabis, but then building up to using harder, stronger drugs that it results in the young person becoming dependent on these drugs, for example, cocaine or heroin. What we have experienced recently in Rotherham is young people being encouraged to use these drugs, but then building up a drug debt and feeling trapped as though they owe the perpetrator money for the drug debts. One way to pay off this money, and one option that is given to the young person, is around sexual activity. This could be in hotels, it could be in cars, it could be on the street. It all depends on where that perpetrator operates and what methods they use. We've experienced young people in Rotherham where they will be saying to their parents that they've been using drugs, but friends have given it to them. It's been a lay-on. That's a phrase that's often used by young people when they've been given free drugs. But what we're coming to learn is that nothing is given for free, and that these young people will be expected to repay that in some way. This could be involving criminality or sexual activity. We've had young people who have mentioned being threatened with by guns, seeing other people threatened with by guns, other weapons, and the fear is real. These young people are absolutely terrified of the consequences if they don't do what they're being told to do. Once the drug debt's been built up, these young people are then encouraged to engage in maybe sexual activity or criminality in order to pay these debts off. What we know is that young people have been seriously injured or stabbed for drug debts as low as £10, so it is significant. What we know about victims of exploitation is that they can be any gender, male or female, any background, any ethnicity and any race. Exploitation really does affect young people far and wide. Some young people are more vulnerable to exploitation than others. That can be a result of early life experiences, trauma, domestic abuse in the family household, inappropriate or unhealthy relationships, growing up in a family where there's blurred sexual boundaries. You might have parents who misuse substances and there's less supervision of their children. Children with a learning difficulty. These things may make it easier for a perpetrator to target young people and exploit them. Everyone has a duty to safeguard children and young people. If you see something that worries or concerns you, please report it and let someone know. What you might be doing is helping us to put together a bigger picture of what life is like for this young person, and that little bit of information could be all we need to tie things up.
It's important to raise awareness in the hospitality industry because when we've done research around CSE, we have found that it has been committed in hotels, B&B, guest houses, and that adults are booking rooms in establishments in order to take children in. They're not providing ID, and sometimes they are going unchallenged and being able to commit these kinds of offences in establishments. And when we have spoken to staff, in the majority of cases, it's been identified that staff have been uncomfortable with the situation with an adult bringing a child into the hotel, but they've not been quite sure what to do about it, and they've not been sure how to tackle it or what to do for the best, so that these people have just been allowed to continue with what they were doing and go into a room. So I think it's really important to raise this awareness and make sure that we're all on the same page and that staff have the knowledge and the confidence to be able to tackle this with us. So the general signs of CSE in respect of people in the hospitality industry, what I'd be looking at if I was a staff member is an adult bringing a child into the hotel, wanting to book a room, potentially being unwilling to provide ID, can't tell you the relationship that they've got with that child. The child may be unwilling to engage in conversation with you because they're not wanting to give too much away about themselves, potentially wanting to pay with cash rather than a card, not wanting to give their name in order to be able to assign it with some ID that they're going to provide you. Basically, if you're feeling there's something not right about that situation, as a person, there probably isn't something right. And I think that one of the best ways to start tackling that is to try and engage in conversation and find a little bit about them. If you're not getting much back, I would suggest there might be something wrong that the police need to come and investigate. So hotels can help to protect their business by various methods, which when we've done operations before, we've actually worked with the hotels and helped them put things in place that would better protect themselves and also assist them to protect the children. So what we looked at were things like carrying out ID checks, so not just on the adult, but also asking if the adult has any identification for the children with them. If there is anything in question, if you're not sure, any reasonable parent would probably understand why you are asking them to show some information to suggest it is your child. So do they have any photos with the child on the phone? Do they have the passport? I would think any adult who is pushing back at that or can't actually prove who the child is or what the relationship is, again, I would start to ask questions about that, because I don't think any parent would object to that, because they would understand why you're trying to put that safeguarding in place and respect you as a hotel for being responsible. So you can also look at CCTV checks. So if you're not quite happy about a situation, or you're wanting to protect yourself and make sure there's nobody in the hotel at that time who shouldn't be there, regularly checking your CCTV, challenging people that are coming in and out of the hotels. I know there have been situations before where adults have booked rooms, booked in as themselves with no guests, and then later on a child has come into the hotel and joined them in the room. So you don't always get situations where you would have an adult and a child checking in at the same time. So if you are getting children walking in and out of the hotel, be proactive about it and challenge them and ask them who they are. You can do it in a sensitive way, but you need to be robust about it and make sure that you know who are on your premises at that time. And if you've got children wandering about unchallenged, you need to be finding out who they're with. And if there is any question and you are concerned, just ring the police, because you wouldn't be criticised for doing that. So we have recently had an investigation that led from a member of hotel staff contacting police. It was a situation where an adult had already booked a room, and it was a child coming into the hotel on their own, unaccompanied, hadn't been in previously, and that staff member asked who they were, asked for the name, asked them to sign a login sheet and provide some details, which the child did, and then said which room they were going into. Now, that staff member at that time didn't have anything overtly in front of them to suggest that child abuse was occurring, but it clearly resonated with them that something wasn't quite right. And after the child had left the reception area, they called 999 and police attended, and we were then able to manage that situation and put some safeguarding in place and get that child out of that situation. Okay, so when we've worked with hotels previously, we've obviously spoken with staff and managers and looked at the things that have concerned them the most. And what we've found is that overall, staff do recognise the signs of CSE, they recognise that there's something not right, and they feel really uncomfortable. However, they don't feel like they have the confidence to know how to manage that situation and what they can and can't do. So we have looked at ways in which to help them and give them more confidence in dealing with it. So we found that some hotels have previously just refused entry, which that is obviously a way of tackling it, but it just moves the situation and the issue onto another hotel and will potentially make the perpetrator just try somewhere else. So although you're managing it, you're not solving it, you're just moving it elsewhere. Some hotels and staff have actually recognised there's something not right, but let the perpetrator and the child into a room and then thought, we'll just keep an eye on it, which again, you're recognising something but you're not doing anything about it, and you're still allowing that child abuse to occur. What I would suggest, if for any reason you're not quite sure how to stop it and they have to be let into a room, ring 999 immediately. Don't leave it 10-15 minutes thinking, I'm not quite sure what to do. Ring 999, because effectively you're allowing that abuse to continue while ever they're in that room. Best case scenario, what we would like to happen is if you get an adult and a child that you're not happy with, if you have that luxury of another staff member, one of you keep talking to them and keep engaging them in conversation and build as much information as you can, because if while police are on the way, they actually leave, you are still able to give something to the police to help them build some intelligence around who that child is, so we can still look to do something even if they've left when we arrive. However, if you can keep them there, if you can keep them talking, if somebody else can ring 999, we'd rather have it where they're both still in the reception area when police arrive, and we can then separate them and do some more investigation and complete any safeguarding we need to. So there are lots of ways you can delay them in reception. You can say things like, I need to make the room ready. You can say that you need to make copies of ID. The bank card isn't going through. I'm sure there's lots of ways in that booking in procedure that you could actually delay them being going to a room. You can even say things like, you know, the bathroom's not quite ready, would you like to use the bathroom down here? And potentially look at separating both parties so that you can have more of a one-to-one conversation with that child. I'm not asking to go into detail about what's happening to them, but again, just I'm thinking about if they do leave before police arrive, we've got more of a picture to work with to be able to identify them both afterwards. Ways in which you can report that. If a child is being exploited in front of you or abused, or you have immediate concerns for the safety of a child, whether they're with you or elsewhere, if you are concerned that that child is at imminent risk of danger, then please ring 999. You are not going to be criticised if we need to put things in place immediately to stop that child being hurt. However, if you've listened to what I've said and it's ringing a bell with you and it's giving you some concerns of something you've heard or something you've seen recently that wasn't quite right, so if you're a member of the public who's seen something in a public place, or if you're a professional who's working with a child and these are identifying with you as some concerns, then there are various ways that you can report it without ringing 999. So you can report via 101 to police, you can report online, or you can also report to your local neighbourhood team. So if you find out who the neighbourhood officer is for that area, you can contact them directly and report your concerns. If you actually don't want us to know who you are, if you want to report anonymously, you can do this through Say Something, which you can find details for on the internet, or also via Crime Stoppers. So my main point is, if you do have concerns, there are lots of ways that you can inform us of it. It might never lead to a prosecution of anybody, but ultimately, if we can safeguard that child and make sure that child is no longer at risk of harm, then that would be my main aim. And if you can do something to stop that, then I really would encourage you to report it in some way.
We all have responsibility to look after our children in the community, and you may well be a hotel worker, you might be a police officer, you might be a member of the public. But if you see signs of exploitation, then you need to report that to the police, to the authorities, so we can act on it very quickly and keep our children safe.